All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. As you can see, we're coming to you from different parts of campus, from separate locations, and our faculty are back and in separate locations, both on and off campus as well this week. They're immersed in the final planning and preparation for next week's start to online classes. And I've certainly been really impressed with their level of energy, dedication, creativity that they've shown, and how they're really embracing this current reality and their commitment to helping one another master new pedagogies and technologies. And above all, their dedication is really coming forward in their work to you and living out our mission of existing for students. So I hope that you will see that next week when you join us in classes. And as we strive to do that and provide you the best experience possible for your remaining time here, we're also working hard to keep our community connected. And even though we're all geographically apart, like we are tonight on this call, and so I thought in keeping our community connected, we would certainly start with our senior class. As I said in my letter to you last week, you certainly have been in my thoughts and continue to be for the challenges that this situation has brought and what it has meant to the close of your time at Cushing. So again, my thoughts are with you. My heart goes out to you, and we'll try to get you through this as positively as possible, and look forward to honoring you in the best way that we can. So I had the individuals who are with me here on the screen that you can see join us tonight. Mr. Bala, Mr. Doyon, Ms. Roller, Mr. Harmon, and Ms. Stone, and thought that we would start, and you all, in terms of parents, got a letter of sort of an outline of what online learning would look like. We wanted to invite everyone to see that, parents, students, and get a firsthand look at some of the details. So before I turn it over to Mr. Bala to do that, one thing, just for the format for tonight, Mr. Bala will start that. He'll present on that, and then I'll just open it up to questions, and you can ask questions just by opening up your chat. So if you've never used Zoom before, on the bottom there's a sort of little word balloon thing like you might see in a comic book or text box, and the chat, you just click on that, and then it opens up a extension to your screen on the right hand side. You can type that in. We'll see that as panelists, and I'll answer those as we go. So, if you type those in, once Mr. Bala is finished, I'll pass on all those academic questions, and then you may have questions for others about college process, student affairs, whatever that may be, and we'll try to get everything answered tonight. And then, in addition, we will be sending a follow-up letter after I speak with the underclassmen tomorrow and our international students on Friday, a summary of how our remote learning is going to work. So we're hoping that with the letter you received at the beginning of yesterday, these individual conversations and presentations by Mr. Bala and others, and the follow-up letter at the end, that you'll really have a good sense of what the next 7 weeks will look like, and also can get your questions answered through this forum. So Raj, I'll turn it over to you, and you can begin.
So I know there were a couple of entries in the chat feature already indicating volume, so I'll do my best to speak up, and hopefully some of that will be resolved. This is a little daunting in only seeing a number and not being able to see faces of those of you that are participating, but I know I speak for everyone when I say that we very much look forward to being able to see you again in classes, and that's ultimately what I'm going to kick off with tonight. And I want to begin by just giving an overview of the approach that we've taken in our planning for remote learning, and I really want to emphasize the nature of it being an approach. And we have thought also about how this is an opportunity for us to reframe our current reality as an opportunity. And two questions that we've continued to ask teachers who have been back and participating in professional development since really Monday, actually. The two questions that we continue to ask them are, what will you teach, and what will we discover? And by asking those questions, this has really allowed us to do a lot of reimagining and rethinking and re-envisioning of the ways that we approach teaching and learning. And so on one hand, thinking about how to provide the same level of challenge and support that we're accustomed to when we're able to teach as we've been accustomed to. Also thinking about the tools that we have available to us that we haven't had to use before, but even such as the platform of Zoom, that looks different now, and there are new opportunities that go along with that as well. Also thinking about the way that we manage and structure time, and thinking about how to manage some of the aspects related to the challenges of schedule right now. And then lastly, really thinking about the ways that we assess and measure learning outcomes. So with that in mind, our mission has been a continuous place to reaffirm why we're being able to take this step, and that notion of existing for students. We've always made a point of having our mission be as succinct as possible, and this lives ever true even as we're making the transition to remote learning. Some of the other principles that we have continued to come back to, no matter what the challenge has been, are the notion of access, of the understanding of the need for flexibility, and both of those as necessities for promoting engagement. And that's our ultimate goal in sustaining our community, learning and otherwise, of finding ways to continue to engage with one another in ways that will allow us to bring the academic year to a meaningful close. We looked at the portrait of a graduate, which is obviously something that we have been working towards with this class. Those of you that we've had since ninth grade, and looking at some of those individual components of each of the journeys that we celebrate. There are certainly principles that ring ever true today, and so again, these are some of the guiding principles that have led us to the multifaceted approach that we are adopting. Again, coming back to that idea of accessibility, there's a fundamental recognition of the neurodiversity that exists within our community, the different ways that students learn, and all of that, which makes our community special and makes every class, every classroom, every learning environment just a little bit differently. So that has been front and center. And then we also understand that when we have everybody on campus, things look a little bit differently in terms of the playing field, and having it be more level in a lot of ways, being able to provide the technology that allows students to fulfill the learning outcomes that their teachers are asking them, understanding that the distractions that can sometimes exist at home that are different, and then ultimately the geography, which otherwise makes our community so uniquely special, in this case, as we've had to separate, is a significant challenge. The time difference between Tokyo and Seoul on one end of the globe, and the West Coast of the United States on the other is ultimately a 16-hour difference. And so finding ways in which we can still come together as a community, again, on all of those different levels, is a very significant challenge. And so we've had to balance those needs with a way of coming up with synchronous and asynchronous learning time. Synchronous learning time being where we can really function together at the same point in time, and then asynchronous being where we can come apart and still engage with different lessons, different activities, but at a very different schedule, on a very different schedule that allows students the flexibility that they'll need to navigate expectations as they're being asked of them. There are expectations for students that we will go over in advisories. Each of your teachers will go over them with you, but some of them are pretty basic and pretty simple. If once we start to really think about what that will look like in our new environments, and so things like routine are key. Trying to stay on a schedule where there's a consistent wake up time. Doing all the things that we would potentially help you do on campus, but turning over that responsibility to you independently, and then also to families to help navigate. Communication is going to be essential to make this work, and so Gmail and My Cushing are the two primary platforms, but we will work to find those ways of communicating electronically and virtually that need to happen to support students. Thinking about workspace is going to be really important, and ultimately thinking about the ways in which you can seek the support that you'll need, and that exists with us in the academic office, student affairs, whether it's your college counselor, your advisor will play a critical component in helping to establish that feeling of connection. And then we also are introducing this website, which will help with anything and everything, but especially technology needs, virtual classroom at Cushing.org as a place where you can seek out additional levels of help if needed. So taking a pretty deep dive into the nuts and bolts, and then I'll broaden out from there. If you saw the communication that was sent home yesterday, this is just a repeat of those bullet points. So we have 7 weeks left to cover between now and the end of the year. And so we've used that as an opportunity to think about constructing modular weekly units that will be completed in succession that works towards a project or a portfolio. All week we've been talking with teachers about what that looks like, and the creativity that they are bringing and the relevance are really tremendous. Again, opportunities to rethink about how we're bringing each of our classes to a close. And so those projects and portfolios will take the place of a final exam in each class. And so again, that speaks to the way we're reimagining assessment. We are going to roll out a slightly modified daily schedule, but every class will have 3 hours of instruction every period. And it will be, again, a combination of asynchronous and synchronous learning opportunities, with at least one of those opportunities falling asynchronously, with the idea that most of that will happen on Friday and going into the weekend. Again, thinking about the time difference, and Friday in Eastern Standard Time is literally Saturday across the globe. And so this flexibility is something that our teachers have really embraced in terms of thinking about how they can reformat their classes. If a student is not able to participate synchronously because of a time change or because of circumstances that have presented themselves, any of those classes will be recorded, much as this this webinar is, and students will have the ability to sort of catch up on their own and hopefully fall back in place.
Raja, can I interrupt you just 1 second?
Please, Randy.
One question that came in, some questions that come in that I'll save to the end if they're about APs and other things, but one thing that's a question about this slide is 3 hours per class, correct?
Yes, in each class. Right.
Great. That was from
180 minutes per class each week.
Great. Sorry, you can continue.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Additionally, we are going to introduce something called an engagement grade, which is designed to incentivize participation and completion of those weekly modules. I'll go into more depth about what that looks like momentarily, but all of this is designed to fulfill our commitment to helping students finish the semester and to earn letter grades for each class. A lot of schools consider it a pass-fail option, and for a variety of reasons, we think that this is a more effective alternative, and one that will ultimately create less challenges down the road, especially in many cases for our NCAA clearinghouse athletes. With the addition of the asynchronous time, we are committed to providing consistent and daily access to faculty members through office hours that will be standing and understood and accessible at multiple points during the week, so that students can continue to get the help that they're accustomed to. Advisory will be a critical point, as I've alluded to, a resource for students. And so we've added a second advisory to each week. And again, our just a repledging of our commitment to making sure that all students have the resources that they will need to fulfill course expectations, understanding that now that we are all spread out and that everybody's situation looks a little bit different, that we will find a way to make things work. So it all comes back to that idea of engagement. Engagement is what is going to make this work, and has been the consistent place of return and our driving outcome. We are continuing to look for ways to find opportunities for participation, but to structure everything in a way that allows for all of us as a community to sort of stay within some clear parameters as far as time goes and as far as the structure of the week goes, so that we can keep accomplishing tasks incrementally as we're building towards that whole. And a mantra that we have been reciting over and over with faculty, and it will be equally true for students, is that none of this is going to be perfect in the beginning, but with purpose and patience and intentionality, that the end product does have the opportunity to be something that is very meaningful and uniquely special, in spite of how it might look different. So again, that idea of weekly modular units, all faculty will have posted a plan for the week by 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday morning. So any student will be able to log in to My Cushing, scan through their classes, and understand exactly what classes are meeting when, synchronously or asynchronously, how they're going to navigate the schedule, a sense of what their work will look like, and even the ways in which that work will tie into the goal that's building towards the portfolio or project. And the goal is, again, and I want to be clear about our intent there, is that what we are not trying to create is a mad rush during week 7 to finish every single project, but really we've asked our faculty to be completely deliberate in their planning and to think about how each week will build towards that finished project, so that during that last week, the amount of work will look essentially the same as all the previous 6 weeks. And it's just a matter of pulling together, of doing that final revising, reflecting, and polishing, so that the end product is something that students can really be proud of. This is just a quick example of what that might look like. I did this for one of my 2 classes. The students will recognize this a little bit more so than parents, but thinking about the topics page within every class on My Cushing as the place where this will be housed. And so that might look like an entire topic folder devoted to the week by week outline of the 7 weeks, or it might be something that's a little bit more in depth, week 1, week 2, week 3, and then something like that opening up to the plan for the week. And so again, everything clearly outlined from the start, enabling students to to progress at the places where they need to at their own pace. As far as how all this comes together in terms of grades and transcripts, again, we have committed to letter grades, and the way that the math works out literally for year-long classes, we are 75% through the school year. And that was an advantage that we found over many of our peer schools that went on break a little bit earlier than we did, and also extended break. And so thinking about what the 25% of a year-long grade looks like, and then dividing that 25% into two components, 10% for an engagement grade, and then 15% for the final project or portfolio. And so we really have tried to create a structure that will enable all students to finish the year potentially even more successfully from a grade standpoint than they were wherever they were at the midterm of the spring. And the engagement grade that I alluded to before will be calculated by a completion of exit tickets at the end of each class, or prior to the beginning of the next class of the week. And these are going to be short 5 to 10 objective questions that call upon students to recall information from the class, and they should be able to be turned in. And again, this is a recognition of the effort that students are providing to keep up with the planning and the intentionality that faculty have provided. The math is a little bit different for seminars since they're standalone grades, but the ratios are equivalent. This is just a quick example for students, thinking about my seniors. Ryan, I don't know if you were out there, but you came to mind for this one. So this is for a student sitting in a class synchronously, or potentially unable to sit in synchronously, and then having to do this asynchronously and complete this exit ticket. A very simple question that points to a moment in time within the class that allows for an objective answer that potentially prompts some additional reflection, and then a takeaway at the end of class. And so again, thinking about being able to complete this relatively simply, but as a way of showing that students are progressing through the weekly modules. A sample of an asynchronous exit ticket. Again, these are just samples that look slightly different, but the overall goal will remain the same regardless of the class. And so if a student is watching a presentation about writing or a virtual lab, having the faculty member essentially record this process along the way, where students have the ability to start and stop, and then looking for what we've called breadcrumbs along the way. So moments in the class where an instructor might say, you're going to need this for your exit ticket. This is takeaway number one. But also as a way of really highlighting what's important in the design of that particular lesson, and potentially helping to preview work that's to come, ultimately, again, leading towards that final project or portfolio. So this is the way that the schedule will look, and I'll spend just a little bit of time here, but I think for our students, they will quickly figure out the places where it's familiar and the places where they will have to adjust. The most obvious one is for students that have been accustomed to double letter classes, to get everything back into a grid that looks like this. The double letter classes will default back to the first letter. So you can see the legend down here. AB classes will be A, BC classes will be B, CD classes will be C, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, each class will meet 3 times during the course of the week. So whatever your A period class is, you'll have that on Monday morning starting at 10:15 a.m. The circles represent classes that are designated to be asynchronous each week. So your second class for A period would be on Tuesday, and then you would just need to get this class done before your class potentially met again on Thursday. Again, each one would have an exit ticket along the way. That's part of the engagement grade. But you'll also notice that there are, again, office hours built into every single day, and the office hours potentially overlap with some of the asynchronous time. So if a student, even really thinking about Friday, where all the classes are happening asynchronously, a student can really decide how they want to progress through their day. If one class is a little bit more challenging than another, math perhaps, then they can potentially tackle that at a window of time and at which they know that their teachers will be available to help. And whether that's Friday morning or even thinking about going into Monday morning, if that work is tackled over the weekend, we have found those windows every single day that align a little bit better for some time zones than others, but there's consistent access throughout the week. And then our faculty are also willing to find time outside of this, whether that's at night or potentially during a free period, anything that works, much like we would do on an ordinary basis. And then lastly, the 2 advisory periods, also staggered in time slightly to help with access. You'll be able to process the schedule a little bit more once you study it, but we think that we've got it to a place where it's, again, parts of it will be familiar, and the other parts allow for the flexibility that every unique situation is going to need to allow. There are new challenges related to what virtual classroom etiquette looks like and video safety. We will review all of these in far greater depth than I'll do now. But I want to at least highlight these as considerations that we have taken. And then we've also tried to be really intentional about coming up with some basic guidelines for parents as well, knowing that our partnership with you is essential in helping to get us towards that end goal. The basic technological components that I've alluded to will continue to be my Cushing as our learning management system. And then this platform of Zoom, we've experimented with a few, and this is the one that has provided the most functionality. And so this will be the primary way in which students are able to access their remote learning. And then it's like all of our inboxes are completely inundated every single day, and the learning curve increases every single day as educators all over the country and all over the world continue to refine their resources and their thinking. And we have continued to try to do our best to cull the best of them and have a sampling here that we will share. But then as we get new ones, we're also committed to providing those to families as well. So that's the overview of the academic approach. Understandably, there are any number of questions now, and as time permits, we will do our best to address them collectively. And we also hope that as things play out day by day, we'll settle into those familiar routines as quickly and as comfortably as possible. So thank you.
Thanks, Raja. So I'll just get right into answering some of the questions that have come up. First one, Raja, I think you can take, and I'll try to go through the academic ones first. Once we get through bulk of those, I'll start to ask others to chime in. But if you have academic questions after that, don't withhold them. Just ask the questions and we'll get them answered. First one, how will AP classes handle their exams and end of year plans?
So this has been actually one of our most inspiring points in a lot of ways. Those of you in AP classes know the demands set out by the College Board, and the College Board has been committed to providing a way to make this work for families, taking into consideration many of the challenges that we have touched upon. And so the College Board is committed to providing students the opportunity to take AP exams, and they have reduced the what that test looks like from the usual 3-hour multiple choice free response format to just 145 free response question. And they've also eliminated 25% of their curriculum. And so that's the curriculum as they outline it. Faculty at Cushing progress largely along similar constructs, but in some places there is some variance. And so in each AP class, the goal remains to have students prepared to take that AP. There will be 2 separate test dates as well. Again, embodying the College Board's approach to find opportunities for students to fulfill that outcome of classes that they embarked upon in September. And at the same time, we have as AP teachers, I do teach an AP class, have newfound flexibility in terms of the way that we're able to approach what would have been a lot of test prep and frequency of deadlines and the way that looks in ways that we genuinely hope will be more engaging while simultaneously preparing students for that AP.
Yep, thanks. Next question, what will happen with art classes?
Art classes are going to also continue virtually. The biggest challenge there is trying to make sure that students will have the supplies and the resources that they need. But for portfolio students, it will look a little bit different than it will for students in those sort of more preliminary introductory seminars. But the art department is fully on board with reimagining the way that they teach art, and are again committed to providing an experience that will allow students to build those skills that will then translate into future art classes that they're taking on campus. And I think one of the additional pieces for some students is also being reassured, not necessarily seniors as much as underclassmen, but being reassured that the work that they've done and will do will continue to satisfy the art requirement for graduation.
Yeah. And the follow-up question was, those classes will receive letter grades as usual?
They will. Yeah. And they will be a similar portfolio and engagement grade process.
All right. Will parents be able to view the schedule in the gradebook on Cushing?
The schedule, we are not going to be able to translate in the My Day feature on Cushing at this point in the year. But parents do have access to individual teacher class pages, and that's where I would point parents to as the as sort of the warehouse where everything will be. That said, faculty will also continue to update the assignment feature of Cushing, and so that's another place that anybody can go quickly to get the recap for the week to come.
Another question, Raja, if an individual teacher had a policy about withholding or foregoing the final exam because of a certain grade level, does this new structure override that?
I'm sorry that it does not. And the thought here again is that the final portfolio or project is not going to be an excessive amount of work at the end, but really work that is structured in a week-by-week basis. So simply by way of engaging each week and completing the tasks that your teachers are setting out for you. And I think it's also important to understand that we understand that homework will look differently too. And so our goal is to provide intellectual stimulation that will lead towards the learning outcomes that we committed to early on when the school year started, and that we have revisited and reaffirmed, knowing that we now have 7 weeks to bring classes to meaningful closes.
Great. Couple questions on office hours. One was about when they were, but I think that was asked before you put that up on the
Okay.
schedule. So I'll skip that one. The second one, are office hours one-on-one or group?
They will be a little bit of both. So teachers will be available, and we're not even completely sure what the how students are going to utilize and access this. But if a student needs um, a one-on-one meeting, that's fabric of that's bedrock of our approach. And so being able to reach out to your teachers and find those windows of time, none of that will change. It again will just look a little bit differently. But we also, again, the main goal of office hours was just to provide opportunities where students knew that they would be able to access their teachers, especially as they're approaching asynchronous work. We wouldn't want anybody to get to a place where they felt that they were stuck and they couldn't move forward and then couldn't get that help for a day, 2 days, or whatever. So immediate touch points that potentially launch separate and individualized plans. Again, the way that we always would.
Okay. There's a couple questions here, I think, confusion that we can clarify. So if I'm a parent listening and I hear the term synchronous and asynchronous, you're referring synchronous to a live lesson, sort of like we're doing, where you're seeing things real time, and asynchronous could be either a recording or some other type of project or lesson that's students have to access at their own time, not when it's actually being recorded or being produced live.
Exactly. So the way that this webinar is being recorded for others to watch at times that are more convenient, any class time that's planned to meet where students are engaging, discussing, every single one of those class meetings will be recorded. The asynchronous classes that are designated as asynchronous classes will look very different. There'll be things like virtual labs and screencasts and different ways of presenting material that allows for a more flexible way to progress through. So pausing and completing tasks and then coming back. So the structure of an asynchronous class that has been designed to be an asynchronous class will feel engaging in a different kind of way.
Okay. And sort of staying on that same train of thought, there's a couple questions about the Friday schedule.
Yes.
So talking about asynchronous, can you explain the Friday schedule? I don't understand the Friday schedule, that kind of thing. I don't know if it's worth popping back up or.
Yeah, maybe that's so on this schedule is basically illustrating that classes, any synchronous class would fall between Monday and Thursday. And again, that's thinking about the way that the time zone on the East Coast aligns with the other side of the globe. And so any class that were to be meeting, we realized this early on as we were planning, any class that were to be tried to be scheduled synchronously on Friday would be on Saturday in Asia. And so the idea behind Friday, or asynchronous Friday, is that students will have completed the majority of the week and they'll just have one last, with the exception of any A period class, one last meeting time in all of their classes that will build upon the work that they've done in the 2 previous periods. And this will happen at an individual's own pace. And so again, this just follows an alphabetical progression, but if a student wanted to tackle their probability and statistics work during G3 Friday morning at a time where they knew that Mr. McFarland was going to be available, they could do that. And so these B through G classes, for some students, they're sort of unofficial into the week will happen at 1:15 on Thursday. And then they'll just have one more class to work through before before the following week and the new weekly module that's being presented.
One more asynchronous class sort of in each period.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. Next question. When do students get their Zoom IDs and schedules?
The schedules, though, they will be able to translate identically from what they're used to. So all A classes will be A classes, all B classes will be B classes, and then the double letters will fall to the first letter. So students will be able to figure out what this looks like very, very quickly. The instructions for logging in will be part of the first invitations that are sent over the weekend, and we will have all those instructions clearly step by step explained. And the goal will be to start this this Monday morning. Office hours will actually begin with an advisory of sorts. And so any technology proofing, problem solving that we need to do in advance of the start of the first formal school day, there'll be opportunities to make sure that that all students are up and ready to go and before A1 on Monday.
Yeah. A couple of repeat questions that I'll just repeat. All classes, including arts, will still receive a letter grade. That came a couple times. AP tests will be administered by the College Board in the new format that Raja spoke about, and certainly more of that will be communicated. Graduation, as of this time, it's not going to be as planned on May 23rd, which I announced. We're honored to doing something for the senior class. We just don't know what the future is going to bring in terms of restrictions on gatherings, when that's going to be allowed, when not. So we really need to play that almost on a day-by-day basis as information changes, and be able to make a decision that we're going to be able to stick with when the time comes. I know that's not a great answer, and it's really disappointing, but we will continue to communicate what we know. Question for Josh about counseling.
So if you had students or if you were engaging in counseling, or if your child was engaging in counseling, our counselors will still be available. Those would be working through email to set up those conversations. One of the things that we have discovered in the last 2 weeks is the support that our counselors are going to offer is going to change a little bit. Our counselors now, because we're moving more remotely, and because we have students who are all across the country and all across the world, our counselors are going to be doing more check-ins. Our counselors are going to be doing more emotional support, and our counselors are just going to be really working with students and to make sure that they have plans. And if they do really need a higher level of support than we're able to really provide at this time, then the counselors will ultimately be reaching out to families to think about how to best set that up using local resources.
Great. Raj, another one came in on academics. Will academic support follow the same format that you outlined with the other classes?
Academic support will almost entirely meet synchronously. So there is a little bit of an exception for academic support. And then for those students that are in academic support that have different time zone constraints, the academic support teachers will work to find different windows of time to round out the week.
Great. Josh, another one about retrieving belongings. When and how is that going to happen?
Yeah, that is a great question. And so right now we are following the mandates, or following the orders ultimately by Governor Charlie Baker. And so for those of you who do not live in the state of Massachusetts, the whole state has been ordered a stay-at-home advisory, and that has just recently extended to May 4th. And so part of that stay-at-home advisory has also been closing of all schools. And so Cushing is closed until May 4th. And then once those advisories are lifted, then we can then share kind of the plan out about what retrieval of belongings would look like. It's our goal that we would have you all return to campus, pack your rooms, retrieve your belongings, and ultimately take possession. But at this time, we're just not really sure. So we are watching the state. We are watching these mandates. And once we are able to finalize our plan, we will be sharing that out with families.
Great, thank you. Emily, what are we seeing in terms of the college office for our seniors? Any changes with information, communication from colleges related to the class of 2020? I think you might be on.
I was muted, sorry. We'll keep sending up, hopefully, weekly updates, but there have been some changes. Colleges are also trying to work pretty carefully with families and understand the impact. So traditionally, the national response date is May 1st, and that's where a student would need to pick the college they'll be attending and make a deposit. Some colleges are holding to that, but many colleges are not. They are pushing it back until June 1st. That's the most common pushback date. So as students and parents, you're weighing your final decisions, you should check the websites of each school to see, have their deposit dates changed at all, because they may have and they may not have. We're staying with grades, so no need to worry about any of that, but they would be flexible with that as well. And then sort of as Raja and you already mentioned, AP exams. Actually, some colleges are being pretty flexible in terms of what score they're going to accept for college credit. Oftentimes it's only a 4 or a 5, but some colleges are pushing it back this year to say we'll accept a 3, 4, or 5.
Great. Raja, another question for you in terms of kids on the West Coast. So if their synchronous class is at 5:30 a.m., what is the option for them?
So the way that, well, I'll begin sheepishly saying that if they would like to join, they are of course welcome. But understanding the challenge there, we are still looking at a school day that begins at 8:15 a.m. and ends at 10 p.m., which is roughly our current schedule, and thinking about that window of time, regardless of time zone. And so if a class falls outside of that time zone, wherever a student or family is, then the expectation would be that they would not be required to participate. But if a class that is synchronous or advisory or any other commitment falls within that window of 8:15 a.m. to 10 p.m., that the expectation would be that the student would participate.
And so they could complete it asynchronously.
Exactly.
Correct. With an exit ticket and
yeah. Right.
Okay. Will AP classes also have final projects?
Is this Kyra's question?
I was trying to keep them anonymous, but yeah.
A few times.
Yes, they will. Again, thinking about, and Kyra is starting to actually write back to your question specifically, but I think the things that you'll see that your teachers are thinking about, Mr. Shableka, Mr. Q, are going to be engaging and exciting. And again, we understand that our goals are realistic. We are trying to match ways to bring every course to, again, that idea that the words I keep coming back to are meaningful close, understanding that when we left, things were unfinished, and that's important to be able to bring each class to its natural place. And the idea behind the portfolio or project is simply to be a guiding force that allows us to progress in a week by week fashion to get there. And also, again, to potentially provide some of the ways that we've been talking about this in the English department this is a very unique moment in time and in history, and thinking about ways to find opportunities to express that through the ways in which we're engaging with the other intellectual work that we're doing are really important. And so the ideas have been amazing so far, and we really do expect that students will appreciate the ways in which those projects have been structured to help students end in a different place than they might have with just a AP exam or a final exam or something along those lines.
Okay. And then if somebody's participating asynchronously, Raja, where would they locate that recording of the class? Or
right. So again, that's all going to be in my Cushing. And so students, again, those of you can envision logging on, going to your a class page, clicking on the topics folder, and each week will live there at the start of the week, but Monday morning, and then that will have the game plan in each of your classes and all the resources that you'll need. And so there will be no surprises in terms of how to navigate the week. And we understand that structure is really important as each family and each student starts to think about the ways that they're going to need to be able to move through a week, juggling any number of challenges that may not have even surfaced yet.
All right. And Josh, you can take this one, or Raja. Absences and lates. How does that work?
The simplest answer is that we will approach it on a case-by-case basis. We are looking for partnership from students. Our teachers are working really hard to find ways to create those opportunities for engagement and connection. Again, like we also simultaneously recognize the need for flexibility, in that a student's situation could change so quickly, even within a day. If it's navigating family dynamics, helping with a sibling, or having a wireless connection go out, or a technological problem. And so on the faculty side of things, we are leading with good intent and assuming that students are willing to meet us halfway. And when patterns start to emerge that look different than one-offs, then advisors, faculty members, and student affairs, the academic office, we will reach out to students and to families to try to figure out ways to get the level of engagement that we're hoping for. And I think at the end of the day, we all recognize that some of the mechanisms that previously were in place just no longer work. There is no more such thing as detention. And so that spirit of partnership is one that is essential. And we are, again, committed to providing ways to challenge and support students as they work through the remainder of the year.
And I think just to follow up to Raj's point as well, I think a lot of this, I think for this to really be successful, it's really engagement. And so, I think that this schedule that our academic office has created does a very good job to balance different engagements. I think it does a very good job to balance where people are and ultimately what they're experiencing. And we know that life will continue to happen and challenges will pop up over these next 7 weeks. And so I guess we would ask too, is that if you become aware of anything that is hurting your engagement or your son and daughter's engagement, please reach out to us so we can help support, so we can help understand, and we can help make those adjustments, when life happens.
And Josh, you talk a little bit about other ways students can engage with us besides Zoom, besides the Zoom classroom schedule that Raj has been talking about.
Yeah, so we are looking at a lot of different ways of engagement. And so obviously, right, as Dr. Burton and as Raja have been talking about tonight, we will have classes which will create a level of engagement. community forum and, and other venues will also start to, or also will continue to be those forms of engagement. I know through our athletic office, we have started to put on power source workouts, which I know some of you have participated in. And then some of the other things that we're going to be doing as well is that those advisory periods are great forms of engagement. We're going to be doing a dorm video competition coming up soon. So that will ultimately be shared through My Cushing, where we are going to be doing a larger Who Knows Cushing Best. So we're going to have about a 4-week trivia contest for students to participate in. And a lot of these trivia questions are, we know that everyone's at home, so they are really Cushing focused and not something that you can just kind of Google and pop up the answer there. We're also, still developing as well. Some of you might have seen some posting from Mr. Price and Mr. Gephardt today. There's going to be some comedic relief that's ultimately put on just put on through email and put on through My Cushing. We're trying to do some mindful minutes as well through our counseling office, and we are really trying to think about how we can offer the same experience that we had ultimately virtually. And we know some of this too is ultimately going to come up organically. So if students have ideas, please pass them along to myself, your advisor, or even Dr. Burton.
Great, thank you. I want to try to keep us to the hour time, just to make sure that everyone's able to participate. Someone asked if we're able to, or if the experience tomorrow night for underclassmen and for international students will be similar. Yes, it will be similar. We wanted to start with the class of 2020 because we want you to know that you're in our thoughts, and we want to come to you first, not only as the leaders of the school, but also a group that probably is the most sad during this time for things you're losing, and wanted to be able to communicate with you first. But certainly tomorrow, Raja will present the schedule similar to what he did tonight. We'll do a question and answer, and the same with our international students. But we also wanted to have this opportunity with the class of 2020 in case there were specific college questions or questions about the end of the year, some of the things that you've already asked, that we could address with you first. Last question that I see here, and then we'll let everybody go. With the cancellation of graduation, what are the considerations for an alternate way? As I said before, all the end of year events, as sad as it is and as hard, I know it's such an important part of everyone's experience. We're not able to do because we can't gather, and who knows? We're not sure when that will come. But as Josh alluded to earlier, Governor Baker's order to shelter in place essentially until May 4th. We don't anticipate at that time it's going to be no restrictions, right? It'll probably, even best case scenario, if that begins to change to the positive, we would expect a slow ramping up to sort of a normal or a new normal level where we'd be able to gather. So we're not going to predict when that'll be, but we are, as I said, committed to honoring the class of 2020, to doing all that we can, given the restrictions that we have at this time. With that, I will let you go. If you have additional questions, you can always reach any of us. I know Beth and Donnie, anything that you want to say before we let the class go as class advisors? Thank you for joining us. So,
just miss you guys.
Yeah, for sure. The campus is very eerily quiet, and when everybody was supposed to come back for spring break, I know that was a weird day here when you expect everyone to arrive, and it still remains very quiet. So definitely looking forward to having our community back. Everyone have a good night. Stay safe, stay healthy. Please contact us if you have questions, and look forward to online learning next week and more communication. Have a good night. Thank you.